All About Writing with Ben and Sara.
Welcome to All About Writing, the podcast that covers everything about the world of writing from the inside out. This is episode 45, part 6 of our series on screenwriting. I'm Sara, here with my co-host Ben, who is an award-winning best-selling author and ghostwriter, editor, and publisher.
And I'm Ben, here with my co-host Sara, who's an award-winning best-selling author, screenwriter, editor, and TED Talk presenter. And we are very happy to welcome back today Tim Boissey, who is a longtime friend of Sara's and a less longtime friend of mine. And we are going to be talking about working in Hollywood. Tim is an expert on this, and he's going to tell us all the good news. So, Tim, please just remind everyone where you come from, who you are, and let's get in.
Hi, I'm Tim. I come from originally Phoenix, Arizona, and then I lived in North Carolina for a while, and that's where I got my formal education, and then moved out to Los Angeles in 2006. I've been out here almost 20 years now. Came out here as a production assistant, and now I am currently a writer, director, and producer of television, film, and commercials.
So you are sitting basically where everyone who is listening to us wants to be one day, and that's awesome. But we want to sort of set expectations for our listeners. If they are interested in, as a writer, in getting into Hollywood, what's it like? And we often talk about writing novels and writing books here on the show, which is a very lonely business. You're basically working by yourself. And then when you finish your project, you give it to maybe one editor, maybe two. And other than maybe your agent and a couple of people at the publishing house, that's it. That's all that's involved. It's a pretty straightforward process. Not easy, but straightforward. Something tells me it's a little different if you want to be a writer in Hollywood. So I don't even know where to start. So let's just start. Where did you start as a writer in Hollywood? How did you get into that, and how did it sort of grow?
Well, that's an interesting question. The first thing that comes to mind was I was a very unhappy first AD. First AD is an assistant director on the set. The first AD runs the set, but it can also tend to be the furthest thing from a creative position. And so when you're right there, like, I don't know, maybe it'd be like being an umpire and you really want to be a baseball player. And so I just took some time off and I became a personal trainer. And I got a client, and he was a writer and a producer. And we just sparked up conversation. And I had written things, just on my own as like a hobbyist. I never really thought about doing anything with them, just because it's just so daunting, to do anything with a script with having no connections and no foot in the door. So I just liked to write, so I wrote screenplays and let my friends read them and all that stuff. But he showed some interest in one of my stories, and he read it, and he didn't like it enough to produce it or anything like that or purchase it, but he liked it and he saw my potential, and he shared with me a project he did. It was a short film, and I said, I saw your short film. Like, I had this crazy idea to turn it into a feature-length film. Could I write it, just for fun? And he said yes. And so I wrote it, and that a few steps later in the future became the first screenplay that I sold. So that kind of gave me confidence and made me feel like I'm a screenwriter now. I've had some success. And then there was just years of nothing. And that's when I figured out really how to be a screenwriter in the industry. I wouldn't say I got lucky with the sale, because nothing came from it other than just a paycheck, but no like notoriety. It never got made,
Hmm.
it just sold. It was never produced. Nobody knows about it. It doesn't matter. But it gave me the confidence to explore the world of screenwriting.
Hmm. So did you start like working for a writing group or like a team, or did you get hired on somewhere, or did you freelance? Like how did you become where you are now? Like what was the next step?
So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like for me, it was just similar to what you've described a little bit to novel writing. I just went to my, corner, and depending on what I was writing, I would take my California medication or I'd pour a whiskey, um, just depending on what I was writing. And I would just write by myself until I had completed something. And after a script was not completed, once I had gotten to the end of the story I wanted to tell and I was ready to
Mhm.
share it with people, the experience is, I think, vastly different than the novel writing experience.
Mhm.
I would say it's more similar to doing stand up. Because after you've got your script, the next step is the pitch. And you're basically pitching to anybody that you want to read it. If you're trying to be a screenwriter, you need people to read it.
Yeah.
And so you start with the people closest to you, like your friends, like, oh, do you want to read my screenplay? Well, what's it about? And it's like, you got to be able to pitch it. Um, and that's like writing a routine and getting on stage and trying to tell a joke. You
Yeah.
you get the audience or you lose the audience right there with the pitch.
So it
And
sounds
that's
like
nerve wracking.
you were using your personal network a lot. Is that really important in Hollywood? Like I know, again, comparing it to writing books, you don't have to know an agent or a publisher to be able to send them something. Is it more important in Hollywood as a screenwriter? Do you have to know somebody before you can send it to them, or can you just
Yeah.
fire
Oh
off
yeah.
the script stuff?
Oh, absolutely. You need an agent or a manager.
Yeah.
If you send a producer a script, um, 9 times out of 10, they're just going to push back and be like, I don't want to touch this. I don't want to get into this. This isn't either registered or copywritten. It's not represented by anybody with any kind of
Right.
legal knowledge of how this game is played. And this game can be played pretty dirty because the other end of that is you send your script to a producer, and the next thing you know, a different version of the same thing is up on the screen, and
Mm.
and there are word for word scenes that you may or may not have spoken out loud in a bar while you were too drunk describing your feature film. It only
Wow.
takes about 6 months to see that turn around.
Wow. Yeah.
I
Good
might,
to know.
I
Good to
might
know.
know.
Yeah. So I guess as a screenwriter, if someone's an aspiring screenwriter, they want to get into the business. So is finding an agent the first thing they have to do? Like, is that where you start? It's you write a bunch of things and then you submit it to an agent.
Yeah, write a bunch of things, submit to an agency, and also while you're submitting the agencies, submit them to festivals because festival competitions will get you in front of the agents and managers, and also in front of producers. And you can skip a whole step of the agent manager thing if you win a festival. That's where the prize is. You get to pitch to these producers, or these producers want to talk to you more about your project.
Mhm.
And I'd say those things probably result in a feature being purchased 45% of the time, and it getting made maybe 10% of the time.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't want to just dissuade any potential screenwriters. But the fact of the matter is your stuff is most likely never going to get produced. It can sell,
Right.
and people will get it, but the battle after that is arduous.
Yeah. I think one of the big differences between being a novel writer and a screenwriter is that there are so many other creatives or non-creatives who have a say in the final script. Like the version that you sell is not at all necessarily what's going to wind up on the screen in the end. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the impression that I get.
No,
Yeah.
not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not at
Yeah.
all.
I think that'd be a really good thing to talk about too. Realistically, from the moment you come to Hollywood, let's say you do get lucky, you get your script bought or your IP optioned. Can you talk a little bit about how many yeses need to happen? Because I think some people think, oh, someone optioned my book, or oh, someone bought my screenplay because it won a festival, or I met with the producer and stuff. Can you talk a little bit about what all happens after that? Like what are the green lights that have to be turned on in order to even see it up on the screen? Because I don't think people understand like how quickly something can die and how many places it can happen before it gets there.
Yeah, and there's no Hollywood fantasy version of it. There is no just one green light. So you've written a great script. The first green light is going to be getting it optioned by a producer. Once it's optioned by the producer, it still needs to become financed. So the next green light is getting it financed. That's usually the longest process. After that, this green light is on. After it's financed, then you cast your script, and that can be also a lengthy process depending on who you want, their availability, how does it line up with the other people you want and their availability, and how does all that line up with how patient are you, to kind of get, as a producer, to get this done. So that could take a year or two to get your project financed. It could take a year to get your project scheduled. Because you have actor availability, you need studio availability, you need the director of photography, you need availabilities. And those are a lot of green lights. You get all the availabilities, greenlit, and then you start building your sets if you are, or you start scouting for your locations. And once you have all of that stuff decided, there's probably already rehearsals going on, but that's not really a green light situation for getting a film made. Once all your sets are done, then it's the crews, and then once you're crewed up, and I skipped a bunch of steps with this green light. You need a director, way back, and then your crew, and then you go.
Now, I think that the process you've just described, I mean, I can see how arduous it is. You've also got your producer hat on right now. As the writer, I don't think any of our listeners would expect to actually be part of that process. Basically, they're part of the first part, sell the script, and then they're just kind of waiting at that point. Like, it's not like they're making any of the decisions that move on. It's now out of their hands.
Yeah, I think if that's the direction a writer chooses to go, which is just write and sell, like I said earlier, maybe if you've written and sold, we'll just keep the number easy. If you've written and sold 20 scripts, you can expect one to get made.
Mm-hmm.
If that one does well, you can then expect maybe to get another one out of it.
Right.
And if you keep a hot streak going like craps, you'll get another picture after picture after picture. But if you roll 1-7 in the film industry, especially nowadays with the amount of content that's out there, like up next, who's the next person that's going to get us an audience?
Wow, man.
And that's it is daunting. But I don't care. I grew up in a movie theater. Because I don't have a choice. I can't do anything else in life. But the less daunting and sometimes even more fun route is television writing. Um, that you're not alone, and unless you're like the showrunner writer and everything's on your shoulders. And very few people do that. They have a writer's room, and so you
Hmm.
sit in a writer's room, and these are accurately just portrayed on television. It's a table, a room of like 8 to 20 people, everybody working on different character stories and bringing those stories together and seeing how you weave them into an episode. And so there's a lot of collaboration going on in that room. And if you're in a
Yeah.
writer's room on a TV show, you don't have anxiety about will this ever get made
Right.
because it's the TV show. You get to see
Right.
your work, you know,
Yeah.
within 3 to 6 months.
So now is that sort of a different career path for a writer in Hollywood, is to sort of get into a writer's room and just sort of just churn out stuff? Like it's like a day job, I just go there and I write. It's somebody else's idea, but I'm kind of making stuff and I'm part of the team.
Yeah,
Um, yeah.
it is a different path, but it's one that you can easily walk back and forth between.
Hmm.
If you're fortunate enough to have success in either realm, and you see it probably more often with like a TV writer. I'm sorry, with seeing a feature writer have like success with a few films, and then he's got an idea for a series, and then of course we're going to watch the series because we loved all those films that writer made.
Yeah.
Um, but it is it's a different pace and a different lifestyle, not lifestyle, but style of work and writing. But it
Hmm.
is one that we as writers can move back and forth between pretty easily.
Yeah.
Unless you're just like antisocial and you don't like working in a group. Um,
Well, that's legit because
yeah,
some
that is
writers
legit.
are not good at that. So
Yeah, then they would not like a writer's room. There can be, you've got to like the pressure,
mhm.
And being able to collaborate without
yeah,
getting your ego stuck. I
yeah.
think that's a big thing.
And it's performative. I mean, it really is in a writer's room. It is performative. There are moments where you're getting passionate about the pitch, your story, how you see it working out, where you see a character going.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm really curious. I've never been in a writer's room. This is something like I've heard of them. I know conceptually what they are, but I'm just trying to imagine sitting there. So like 8 hours a day, I'm sitting there in a big boardroom with my computer with 8 other people, and I've been told, okay, you got to write the subplot for this character for this episode. Here are some basic parameters. Go. Is that kind of how it works, and that's how it starts?
Yeah, I'd say that's like watered down version of it. Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah.
That's the gist of it.
And would I be competing with another writer? Like whichever one of you writes the better B plot, we're going to use it, or no? It's okay. It is a
Mm,
collaborative thing. It's not
No,
cutthroat.
yeah,
Okay.
I'd say like in the writer's room for a show like um let's say like a cartoon series. Um, you your goal is to work together as a group, not really compete like with ideas. You always want it's writer's room mentality should be like there are no bad ideas, but best idea wins.
Mhm.
And it's a democracy. There's no one person deciding which is the best idea. That's far too objective. So it's
Mm.
you know it's we as a group settle on this idea.
Cool.
But you wouldn't be so much competing with your character and somebody else is writing the same character and see who's going to get into the episode. It'd be more that you're competing for the character's screen time and their plot and their story and what you think it should be. Um, and because a lot of times in those rooms, you won't be on a shorter thing like a TV show half hour. You'll be more responsible for an entire episode.
Okay.
And you will have the room around you who has written for those characters in the past, saying like, "Well, I don't know if the character would do that," or "Don't you think the character would do this like they did in the same situation back in episode 3 of season 6, because this is
Right.
really similar to that. And
Right.
then it'd be up to you, the writer, to justify why you did what you did, or be like, "Oh yeah, you're right. You're right. That's exactly how the character would react."
Mhm.
So it's a workshopping. A writer's room is just workshopping the different episodes as you're writing them, sort of.
No, you got to come to the table with your episode a lot
No,
of
I
the
know,
time.
but then once you have the episode, then the
Yeah.
whole group workshops that one episode in collaboration. You're not just
Yeah,
like it's done.
exactly.
Okay.
Either the writer's room will workshop it, or your showrunner, who has the overall arc, will be like, "Yeah, no, it needs to go this way."
Mhm. Mhm.
Can you tell people how to get in a writer's room if
How to get
it
in,
sounds interesting to them?
to get into a writer's room, yeah, I don't want to sound redundant, but this is the last episode. It's the same way. You get an internship, or you go into a TV show, into the writer's area as an assistant or a production assistant. So you get a job as a writer's assistant or a production assistant, and you just try to. Well, if you're a production assistant, you could end up in an area you don't necessarily want to be in, but it would be kind of like in your best interest to like get to know the writers and get in their faces and start doing things for them. And then you can move into like being a writer's assistant if you don't just get the writer's job straight off the bat. You know. Usually, if you're an intern, you'll go from being an intern to a writer's assistant, and then from a writer's assistant to either a writer or like an editor.
Mhm.
Now, I would want to put a caveat on that personally. Like, I think if you have representation, if you're lucky enough to get representation, like I've had some of those steps, I've been able to jump over some of them and have interviews directly with the executives and the showrunners at NBC and other places. Not that I necessarily got those jobs, but I was able to have conversations and interview to be in the writer's room because I had representation. And I think to some of your other points, I think, you can you don't have to put all your eggs in one basket. Like you have to go and do an internship or work in a writer's room per se. Like you can do the festivals or you can do the networking. You can try and find reps who will then help you hopscotch into some of these other positions and have opportunities. When you say like that's another avenue for people if they're like daunted by like I'm 60, I don't want to be a PA.
Yeah,
I'll drop
yeah,
the coffee.
absolutely. I mean, if you're a good writer and you submit and you win, like you'll get recognition and they'll want to hire you. They do track those things, and and if you don't feel like you're being paid attention to as you're winning things, then you start submitting that's when you start submitting your scripts with all of the laurels that you've won and all the awards in the body of the email and really get their attention and do that. But I'd also say like you got to make sure they're hiring.
Yeah. But that's yeah. But I mean,
It's
even
it's
you
a
could
lot tougher these days. It's a much tougher these days because the guild and the amount of jobs that are out right now are there's not a lot, and it's only going to grow if we get new shows. And then there's kind of a catch-22. We're not going to get new shows because they're not going to hire new writers, and that's like kind of like a union thing. They're just trying to protect their job security. Like, well, if you got a new show, hire the writers that are already in the union. Unless you wrote the show and come on board as like the showrunner or one of the writers, and you were able to negotiate that in the contract. Just it goes to writers that are already established now. So
that's
be careful
you go.
when you sell your script. If you want to stay on board, you write that into your contract.
Okay. It's overwhelming.
Yeah, there's one other aspect of this which I just would want to touch on is when you're in a writer's room and you've put together the episode, it's all done, you guys have all agreed, then it goes off to the director and it goes to the actors. how much does it usually change? Because actors are infamous for changing lines, and directors want to tweak things. Even at that point, does the script usually survive, or does it change a lot?
Yeah, in my experience, that's more of a myth that
Okay.
actors rewrite all the time, right there on the scene. When you're at that level and you're producing, and your show is in production or your movie is rolling and you're filming, a lot of money has been spent, and so the script has to be worth that money, which means the words written down have to make sense and really hit home emotionally and resonate, with the actors who are being paid a lot of money to deliver the lines the way they're written.
Mm-hmm.
When an
That's
actor
great.
struggles
That's
with a
great to hear.
line and it causes a rewrite, that costs tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
It's not very common for a script
Okay.
to change that much.
It's probably then that's the exception, and which is why we hear about it. Because so and so an actor is
Yeah, bad
infamous.
news is the only thing that makes the news. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to know. That's good to know. It makes me feel better as a writer that what I write may actually make it onto the screen, and the stupid actors can't just change everything that I wrote. So good. Okay, it makes me feel better.
That's I think it's very rare and at a level. I mean, if you wrote a screenplay and you sold it and it's going to get produced for $50, there might be some line changes just because of the caliber of people that are working on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, fair enough.
Well,
Maybe not.
as we wrap this one up, I just want to ask if Tim has anything else he wants to say about like the reality of living and working in Hollywood that people who don't might not know or should know before they move across the country. There's
Yeah, it's extremely difficult. You have to want it. That being said, it's extremely rewarding. It's the most fun. We play pretend for a living. If it's what you love to do, then do it. And don't be discouraged by the amount of no's that you're going to hear in your career, because every door closed is another door open. You just have to keep moving on and be resilient and keep writing, keep creating, and keep pitching your stories. Somebody's going to want to hear it.
Great.
perfect. That's like the best positive note to end it on. Thank you. That was perfect. So on that note, then I'm just going to say that that's our show for today, and remind everybody who's listening to not forget to subscribe so you don't miss our chats. Feel free to leave a review. It helps us a ton. If you want to hear more from Tim, check out some of our other episodes where he gives more of his great sage advice. But otherwise, if anyone's looking for help in their book writing, we recommend our friends at Cascadia Author Services, and you can find them at cascadiaauthorservices.com, as well as finding Ben at bennettrcoles.com on Facebook and also on Instagram.
And you can catch up with Sara at saradaman.com and on Instagram. Thanks for joining us today. Please reach out if there are any topics you'd like us to cover, and we'll see you again when we next chat all about writing.
This has been All About Writing with Ben and Sara.